And so this is Ray Luss with Citizens Oversight, and we're about to start the meeting now. I do have the recordings for these meetings, and I'll send around the link if you want to review this one or the ones in the past. Now, mainly today, I wanted to see if we could talk about vote by mail, but prior to the call, Cindy was asking me some questions, and I wanted to let her ask those questions. Let me put you on, unmute you, Cindy, so you can ask your question, because I didn't want to answer her question and then have everybody ask the same question. Go ahead, Cindy, ask your question.
Well, Ray, I'll just start right from the beginning. What I asked you was if you had a chance to count in any way the San Francisco digital ballots that have been posted and compare that to the reported results, and you were explaining the software, et cetera.
Okay, so basically, just to give everybody an update, we do have this thing called Audit Engine, which is under development, and it's coming along pretty good, I have to say. We finally, we've gotten past 2 different vendors, equipment, ES&S and Dominion. We've done a set of both of them. And I'm running, I can share it. It's actually running right now on my machine. I'll show you what it looks like. Let's see here. Share screen. And I'll share this over here. And then let you see this thing here running. For those people that have their screen up, this thing is now going through the Leon County, Florida ballots. This is doing the extraction, so everything is already set up, and each time it spurts out, it has done 1 ballot. And so you can see that if you can kind of read it as it swings by, right about right there, it says file number. Maybe I can get it to stop for a second, because I can't. Actually, we're not even at the bottom. Let me get down here to the bottom. And then if I move this up, I can stop for a second. So it says file number, get it to stop, there we go. 90,019. And this ran all night and part of yesterday. So, but this is running in a single threaded mode. There's 141,000 ballots in the set. And it's converting them here, but the time that it takes is in terms of adopting a new type of ballot, a vendor, is quite a bit, you know, but we've gotten past getting the alignment, getting the timing marks, getting it all templated and everything, and mostly automatically doing templating. But going over and doing San Francisco is going to take some time for us to be able to, you know, configure the system for that. So it isn't a type of thing where you just, you know, hit a big green go button and get started on it. But so the story is that we've gone to their site, and going back over here, we've gone to their website, we've looked at their files that they have, and they have put all of their ballot images up for us to access from this last election, as they have in the past. And they have some other files. They have the new cast vote record format with quite a number of, I think it was 13,000 files all together are the set of cast vote record files. So it's quite a number of those files. It used to be just like one big file is what they would do. And now they're much more verbose, and they have a lot more data in them, but they also just take a lot more space and trouble to work with. So we've looked at that, and I would like to do that. Maybe it'll be the next thing on our plate. We just got done with Leon County. This is what you see running, and it's now going all the way through, and we had to really, you know, massage things a bit to be able to get that to work. But I have a feeling that in time we're going to be able to do well this way. Okay, so then what was the next part of your question? Because I know there was a second part, Cindy.
Oh, could I ask another question too? You mentioned, I wrote it down, I thought. What was the name of the software?
Okay, so this is called Audit Engine, and it's our own software. Yeah, we were talking about the fact that it runs in the cloud. So this actually is running on my machine right now, but as you can see, it takes a long time. We're talking about days and days of running to get through a run. Whereas if you run it on the cloud, then it basically spawns jobs to up to 1,000 machines at a time, and therefore it can get it done in about 10 minutes. So it's really worth doing. And this is going to be a very powerful tool for us citizens to be able to watch these elections in a way that we've never had a chance to do before. And I think it's scaring the hell out of everybody that we're going to be able to really accomplish taking a look at all of the ballot images and recreating the election. However, you know, look, the San Francisco gave us their ballots, and that should be the precedent enough to get the ballots from the other counties in California. And let me give you a quick update on that. So we asked the top 24 counties in California for their full ballot image sets and other data. And they, right. So they have excuses of various types saying that there's personal information in the ballot images, or they're sealed and they're the same as ballots. One place is saying that the ballot image is exactly the same legally as a ballot. And I said, well, maybe I have a snapshot of the Mona Lisa I'm willing to sell you for a few $100 million then, because if it's the same, then so is that. But the basically, these are just, I think it's an education process. Of course, they're going to drag their feet and say no, and they are, you know, practiced at doing that, so that whenever you ask for something, if they can possibly get out of it, they figure out a way to get out of it. But the precedent that San Francisco has provided their ballot images without any kind of grief whatsoever is really, really, you know, huge for us, because it isn't that everybody is saying no. A lot of times they are willing to do it. And so for that standpoint, we're making progress. The Secretary of State, I just wanted to tell you the update. The Secretary of State said in their response letter to all of this other county officials, they said that basically, number one, that ballot images are the same as cast vote records. And that's not true, but they're saying that. Number two, cast vote records are the same as voter registration card information, and they have private information on them, and they don't. And so then they also said that number three, in our recent regulations, we have this provision that says that per the voter registration law, voter registration cards can be concealed or, you know, kept private from the public. And so you should not post the voter registration card information, that therefore you should not post the cast vote records during the audits. And therefore, since you shouldn't pass the cast vote records by this bad reasoning, therefore you should also not post the ballot images. And so there's two real arguments that they're sending back to us now. And so I've been thinking about it. I think the way to approach it is that to think of this as an educational process at first, and say, okay, look, we know that not everybody is understanding this stuff. We want to just clarify this and get it clarified. Now, frankly, I don't want to have to go to court to do these things, but we may have to. So that's kind of where that is. All right, so let's move on now from those questions.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Could you theorize why San Francisco was able to put these up or willing to put these up? And, you know,
They
when
just
other
have
counties...
people there who have been very progressive in terms of their desire to, you know, to provide openness and complete transparency of what the elections are doing. And, you know, frankly, I think all of these election officials should have complete transparency in mind. What are they trying to hide? They say that there's personal information. It's just false. It's absolutely false. In fact, there's a law that says they're supposed to redact any personal information from the ballot. So they can't say that it's in there. And they can't say that their voter registration card information. All of that is lies and an attempt to obfuscate what they're doing. And I guess, you know, if they're not going to want to, you know, we're going to have to kind of talk about it because, you know, of course, if you start suing these people, you're not making friends with them. And, you know, we kind of want to be friendly with the election officials, but, you know, it's just ridiculous what's going on here. So my point of view is that if we go through the process, and you know, I really don't like to take things to court very quickly because that is, yeah. So Harvey says March, yeah, the ballots from San Francisco from March were already posted and we've already downloaded them and hosted them on our site. And so we have all of those ballots and cast vote records.
Well, what is this ballot image or ballot audit and review? When you go to the elections office, the San Francisco elections office site to download the ballot images, under that is a link to an external site that says ballot images and ballot audit and review. What is that, and when is it an outside group? Is it going to an outside group, or why is it on an external?
It's just on an external files service because the files are so big. And so they don't try to host them on their regular website. And this is normal, and we suggest that they do that. What I can do here is just for fun, I'm going to share my screen for the people who are on screen, you know, on their computers. And I believe I've got something popping up here I got to deal with. Okay, so so if you can see here, I would guess, all right, so this is San Francisco from March 2020. And you can see that there's, you know, 1 through 11, but I've had to split up 2 of them because they were too big for our file saving service, which is limited to 10 gigabytes. And then also we have this Cbr Export, which, oh dang, I should never do that because Windows has a really hard time with these really big zip files. So what I'll do is do it this way. San Francisco, oh, we got to go up one. March, and we see here the Cbr Export. Here, I'll blow this up to the full screen. And let's make it bigger if we can. I don't know how to do that. So I guess we're stuck with that fine print. Sorry about that. But you can see here there's Cbr Export 0, and that goes on down to Cbr Export 13,626. So those, all of those files together comprise the cast vote record. And then there's some other files here, manifest, you know, to say what parties, what precincts they are. And then within each one of these is a JSON, which is just the way to describe data. And for example, the contest and the ID for the contest, this is in a, this is one of those cast vote record files. And I don't understand why we're not seeing votes or anything in this. why that wouldn't say, did I click on, oh, I did the district manifest. I meant to get this one. So for a given cast vote record, we see the contest. This is the primary from March. We see the precinct number and the ballot type, different configuration of ballot. That is what we call the style. And then they come down here to a candidate, and then whether there is a vote. True. And so, you know, we have to write code and so forth to extract information from this, and if we want to compare it with our result. Why is that thing popped up back there? I don't know. Let's see if okay. So did that answer your question, Cindy?
Well, yes, I understand now. It's actually going to an external site because the files are so ginormous.
Yeah, they are.
And they couldn't handle them on their own server. So it's still part of the county doing this. This is not like a third party. That's the way it looked to me when I saw that link, that it was a third party.
Yeah, no, it's the county doing it, but it's just the county is doing it, but they don't have capacity on their website, so they're using a third party. Okay, let's go over to talking about this very important issue, which is vote by mail. And we've had some of a discussion on this, and Stephen Rosenfeld provided a document here, and it's open in the Google Docs. If you guys want to help edit it or add comments, feel free. I just wanted to tell you that we did work on this in this other group that I'm in to some extent, in terms of when they proposed in the bill that went forward with the House. They proposed a section which was about vote by mail, and it was actually, we thought, nearly impossible to implement. And especially as we were talking to some of the people that were in places like Connecticut, which are normally very much centered around, you know, voting in person mode at precincts, versus the other states, like the Western states especially, that have used vote by mail quite a bit. And in those situations, the way they're working now, they have very few absentee ballots. And the way I understand it is they actually sort them by precinct and bring them to the precinct on election night and merge them into the ballots that are there. And however they might count those ballots, some areas might count them by hand at the precinct. A lot of them count them using the machines that are there in the precinct, or maybe just bundle them up and take them in. But they're all put together in that same precinct at that time. In those situations, there's no delay like we see here in California, where there is a substantial delay sometimes, because you have, number one, ballots that happen to arrive after the election day, just simply because they're allowed to have the postmark of election day. And number two, because there's a time for curing signature mismatches or missing signatures. And that was another 5 days. So if you have three days just to wait for the ballot to come in, then another 5 days, you're already potentially out 8 days before you even start the process, you know, to tabulate them. Now they start before election day. Typically in these vote by mail districts also, they start to actually open the ballot envelopes, pull the envelope out, and get it set up for tabulation, and maybe even start scanning them without publishing or actually looking. They're not supposed to know what the tabulation totals are. until election, close of polls. And then they can start looking at the numbers. Sometimes they've told me that, oh, we don't start scanning them until after election night, the close of polls. And I find out later that no, they actually are sitting here and running them through the machine and scanning them, even though there's some sort of a lock on the on actually inspecting those images, or if they do inspect them and decide what the vote is and adding that to the tabulation, they're not supposed to look at it. So there's those time delays. So they can start before, and there's a lot of work that comes in. They first photograph the front of the ballot, and there is something that might be handy here because Harvey just sent out, and I recently these pictures of the vote by mail envelopes and stuff. So let's take a look at that. Let's see if I can. So this is a scan of the envelope, and I guess rotate. Oops. Okay, so there's the envelope, and no postage necessary. That's an important part that a lot of people have asked about. Does it need postage? And for a while they said add postage. There's a lot of conflict about whether it does need postage or not. And then it needed extra postage, right? It was too heavy for the regular rate. So then would it be rejected because it didn't have enough postage? But now they said no postage necessary. Now on the other side of the ballot, and this is kind of a key point about how these are actually processed, because because they have here, I declare under penalty of perjury that I am a legal resident within the election precinct in which I am voting, and that I am the person whose name appears on the envelope. I have not applied, nor do I intend to apply for a mail ballot from any other jurisdiction of the same election. I understand that voting twice in the same election constitutes a crime. And then you sign it and date it. Your ballot cannot be counted unless you handwrite your signature. Do not print. Power of attorney not accepted. Date of signing. The voter is if the voter is unable to sign, she may make a mark witnessed by a person over the age of 18, and then you witness it. So you also have this thing here, which is a person authorized to return the ballot. If you are returning this ballot on behalf of the voter, provide the information below. Compensation for returning ballots is prohibited by law. Name of the person returning it, relationship to voter, and signature of person authorized to return the ballot. So now, it used to be originally in California, you had to either deliver it yourself or sign off that someone else was delivering it for you. It doesn't have that anymore. Or you had to use either US Mail or FedEx or one of these official carriers. So that's on the outside. So what happens first is this ballot envelope, which contains the ballot, is run through their scanner machine, and it looks at the barcode, which is not actually shown on here because it's not printed. So what there would also be on here is, I'm not sure if it's up in this blank area up here or over here, but I believe it's right here. They have your name and your barcode right here. So when it first goes through the machine, it sees that. Now maybe Harvey, you gave these. Did you have to? This is a blank. Did you have to block out anything, or did you get a blank one? Didn't you? Let's see if you're on there. Still here. Harvey, let's see. What are you able to answer that question?
Right, without the microphone.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead. So
Okay.
was this a blank?
Yeah, the deputy registrar, I was over there watching the last of the signature verification the day before they certified, and I asked for and got these blank copies of the various envelope designs. This is just one of the envelope designs. And I do actually have another actually voter-specific ballot envelope that came to my father, but so I can explain, if you like, what the other envelopes look like.
Well, was that in the email? Let me see if I get the other one here.
No, I
Well,
didn't send.
these were the letters that happened if you either, if it did not mismatch. So let's do this real quick. This is kind of important in that, and this is what causes a lot of the extra time. You got to understand that they have to now, by law in California, send you a letter if your signature did not match. So it says here in this letter, the San Diego Registrar of Voters received your vote by mail ballot. However, we determined that the signature you provided on your return envelope does not match the signatures on file. To ensure that your vote by mail ballot will be counted, signature verification must be completed. And then in this letter, you say, I, so-and-so, am registered, blah, 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 and then you give your signature and so forth that this was your ballot. So this is actually pretty good. I mean, we have to acknowledge that in California, the voters have been pretty successful on getting them to really bend over backwards to try to make sure that all of these ballots that weren't signed or did not match, that they can come in and get them to match. You know, more than these other parts of the country where they're not used to doing this.
Yeah, there were two different practices used in San Diego with these letters, and I believe this file contains a picture of the other.
Yeah, let me look at the other one.
The other letter, which uses the same return form which you just showed there. But this is a letter, this one, as you can see, was actually redacted because this is one, they didn't have a copy of the blank version of it, but they handed me a redacted one. And this one is actually sent out, they changed the practice to go to this letter, which explains the signature cure to the voter, and it actually provides an image of the signature which was used in the comparison. And they also provide a add to the letter, a digital printout of the actual envelope front that has all the voter ID information on it, including the signature that was on it. So the people are actually, if they get this letter in the mail, as a result of a cure, and they may not ever see the letter, but if they do see it, they actually have a chance to look at both signatures that were used in the comparison that caused the rejection that led to the cure letter, which I think is very helpful. Also would be helpful for anybody who was actually engaged in executing a signature fraud, because they would know exactly, exactly what data was actually used and how successful they were or why they weren't successful, for example. But this is much more information than Colorado provides. That's why I collected these letters, because the Colorado letter that's similar to this is just a form that has a checkbox, and next to the checkbox it says, I returned my voted ballot. And if you check that box and you include a copy of the ID with that has the same name as this cure letter has, and anyone signs, it doesn't really matter what the signature is on that return letter, that will cure the ballot for counting. So it's much, much more lax than this one is from a legal point of view. This one actually does have a very strong statement about, yeah, I am the voter, I signed this, but it's my name and I signed that thing and so forth. So
yeah,
I prefer this one to what Colorado does.
Well, that's good to know that, and you know, Harvey, I'll just give everybody the background. Harvey Branscombe is quite a knowledgeable person from Colorado and knows all about, and they're a, you know, entirely or nearly entirely vote by mail state. So I did see, Mimi, did you have your hand up? Did you want to say something? Go ahead.
I can also comment about the envelope. as it compares to the Colorado envelope. The great thing about this envelope that you showed before is that the return address on the envelope is the return address of the headquarters. So the voter does not put their identity, write anything on the opposite side of the envelope. All of the voter information's on one side of the envelope, and the opposite side of the envelope is a different color, which means if you're observing the room where extraction takes place, you can see whether all the envelopes are showing no voter information or they are showing voter information, which would be hugely valuable in understanding whether there's a big risk for voter privacy at the crucial moment where the voter identity is separated from the ballot. So,
right. So
I was able to watch for that in California, never been able to watch for that in Colorado because that policy is not used. So
well, that's another good point. So this is a minor detail, but it's very, very important in terms of voter privacy to have one side of the ballot envelope, the envelope, have no, as you see it here, it's yellow, and let's turn it over so we don't have to worry about upside down. And it does not have you don't put your return address on this. It's got the return address already up here. It's for them. And then it's got its own, address on here for return. And there is nothing on here that is voter specific. So when you have them turned in this upside down, all on the other side is all the voter information, including, as I said, it's not shown here, but I think it's up in this blank spot is where the voter's name.
In the lower right.
Oh, you think it's over here? Okay.
Yeah, so I got it. That one right here.
Okay, so it's over here then. So the voter's name and so forth and his barcode is in this blank area printed on there. And then this is how when they first come in, they are run through a machine that takes a picture of this side of the ballot. And then before they're opened, they check this signature to the ones on file. Okay. Now
Usually they actually don't check anything in that upper right corner box where the person authorized to return. It says person authorized to return. Of course, it doesn't show any authorization to return, as you just pointed out a moment ago. It's the person who's returning who actually puts their name and signs there, but nothing is done in San Diego with the contents of that box. I asked.
This one, they don't look at it.
They don't. The other interesting thing that could be improved, and I've recommended this already to the registrar, is to actually print the name, not in that blank open space in the lower right where your cursor is, but actually print the name above where on this envelope it says date of signing. That is up right adjacent to where the signature happens. And the reason to put the printed name there is so that the voter's husband or wife won't actually sign the wrong envelope. And that leads to a lot of extra time in vote by mail processing because it's not uncommon for households to mix up the envelopes and sign the wrong one, in which case, of course, a signature discrepancy occurs. And then the cure letter would be sent out, but for the fact that they carefully check all the other signatures at the same address to see whether another one matches the reference. So it's hugely beneficial to have the name right next to where the printed name right next to where the signature goes so that that mistake won't be made. That was something discovered in Colorado.
Well, that's a good point.
You may see that happen in San Diego in the future since I've already made the recommendation.
Oh, nice. So you can see we have a really good person here with us. And Harvey's got these great ideas and is very knowledgeable about this. So now I do see a hand up, Mimi. Is that your desire to talk? Go ahead. We can't hear you for some reason. I don't hear you yet. No, not on.
By the way, for Mimi's benefit, and I saw her email to this list, I actually was in the extraction room in Los Angeles, and Trey, who's the manager, the supervisor of that room, I mentioned to him that I noticed that all of the envelope, their envelope looks a lot like this one. So it's very close to this one. It has a different color on the opposite side. And I noticed that the wrong color was visible on all maybe 80 different desks where the massive vote by mail extractions taking place. And in that extraction, they removed the various sheets. There's several sheets in Los Angeles in a mail ballot packet. They come out of the identifiable envelope and they're looked at by the one election worker per each station. And they look at both sides of all the sheets to see if there are any problems that they notice that the tabulator won't be able to handle. And I believe they're looking for personalized information also, which is a good thing if they were doing that and sending those ballots to duplication or redaction. I think in Los Angeles, duplication. But I noticed that all of the stations had all of the voter identity side up, which meant that every station, the person who was opening the ballots and looking at them was also basically looking at the name of the voter that went with that ballot. It's just an absolutely horrible voter privacy violation. And when I mentioned it to the supervisor, he said that he would correct it. And 2 days later, I was back in Los Angeles and I noticed that it had been corrected and all the, I think they're pink, I forget the other color in Los Angeles, but all the colored sides were up, which meant the workers were not looking at the names of the voters. So.
Okay. Now, Mimi, I see your hand up. I haven't heard anything from you yet. Can you check your microphone or something on your side? Now you're muted. Okay, now you're not muted. Try. Not hearing anything. There, I can see you. I can see you. No, not hearing anything. What you want to maybe call in with the phone, Mimi, and yeah.
You can talk on the chat channel.
Oh yeah, should have suggested that. Oh, we'll see what she has to say. She's very good too from the LA area. Okay, so let's take a look while we're waiting for her to come on and okay, there's let me get Harvey's got spotlight. Let me spotlight this video. Unshare. Let me stop sharing. Okay, so Harvey is showing us okay, how the name is printed on there in this corner. Yeah, I can see that it's pretty small and it'd be pretty easy to not see that and mix it up and sign the wrong one. Okay. All right, so let's see here. We'll go back to this other screen for now and take a look at the Google Doc. Some of the questions that, okay, Mimi, I see you're trying to get in.
I'm trying to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Wonderful, that's great.
Okay, go ahead.
I had asked in the chat, now that I'm not seeing it, but was I seeing the outside of the back of the return envelope?
Yeah.
For San Diego? So the voter's signature is in transit, viewable by everybody who, yeah. I guess that's true of LA as well. I'm really in the dark now, so I will defer to Harvey. That was my question.
That is true of LA also, yes.
That's true of LA also. Okay.
Yeah, that is kind of, I mean, if people are going to require your signature on the outside of an envelope, that's kind of contrary to our sort of traditions in this world, that you don't sign the outside of envelopes, because then that divulges your signature to everybody who sees it. But I do believe that in this case, they're going to have a pretty hard time not doing that, because it means opening yet another envelope.
I agree. I agree.
And
then there's a secrecy envelope that separates the ballot from the signature, I believe.
No,
in LA.
I don't think so. And Harvey, maybe you can comment on that. We did talk about that earlier.
There's not.
There's no secrecy envelope, is there, Harvey?
There is no secrecy envelope or sleeve used in the 2 counties I saw in California.
Okay.
I think that's going to go by the wayside too, just because of the complexity of getting people to do this right anyway.
Yep.
If you say you have to put it in another envelope. And essentially, I think that in talking to Harvey about this, this thing about having the color side, so when they're processing it, when they're opening it up, they keep it down, face down. And I think also Harvey was saying that in some places isn't this what you were saying, Harvey, that they pass it over a wall or something where they take it out and then have the other person open it up? Was that what you were saying?
If there is not a reason to have to go back, put the ballots back into the envelope again, then the best practice is to actually do a stack of a batch, say 25 envelopes, remove well, let's go with the ideal. The secrecy sleeve is removed from 25 envelopes. The 25 secrecy sleeves are passed to a different team in a different location, and the ballots are removed from the secrecy sleeve, thus absolutely preventing any leakage of the voter identity from the envelope to the ballot. There is a new law in Colorado where in a primary, the unaffiliateds are allowed to get both the Republican and the Democratic ballot. And in that case, it is essential that the envelopes be able to go, or sorry, the ballots effectively be able to go back into the envelope, because if the voter votes both party ballots, then they're both invalidated. And so the voter must not be given credit for voting. And so they have a very carefully set up arrangement where the one election worker or a team of election workers are looking at the voter identity, and another team in the same room are looking at the ballot, and they are talking to each other, but there's a physical barrier of some kind, or they're facing opposite directions, or there are a variety of different mechanisms used. But the idea being to physically prevent the identity of the voter from being associated with the contents of the ballot, even though they're looking carefully at the marks on the ballot. There's a lot more attention to this paid apparently in Colorado than in California, and I'm gathering that's because Marilyn Marks and I have been asking about this voter privacy issue, and we're not the only ones, but a bunch of activists have been asking and suing the counties and the Secretary of State over this privacy issue for a number of years. And so Colorado has learned to be very clean, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
Apparently not so much in California, but it varies from county to county, I think.
Okay. Do you want to say something, Mimi? It looks like you're moving your head like you're about to say something.
Right. Just, I wish I knew more about what all of our counties were doing with this. What I have always heard and seeing this, I'm not sure, was that you could tell the party of a voter from the outside envelope. I don't know if that was actually true at one time, having to do with.
I think that is sometimes very true. They have it marked so that they can, basically you do know, like from the outside of the envelope, you can tell a lot, because as we look at this picture again, it's not shown here, but if you got the name, the address of the voter,
Yeah.
and also their voter ID, I don't know if it says the party there, but I know in some cases I have seen, the party, but you can look them up. You can look
exactly.
up.
Well, it's an extra step to look it up, but I have always heard, I think Judy Alter told me, party affiliation, and that, in a corruption scenario, that makes it easier to know which ballots you're going to accept and which ballots you're not. I'm only bringing that up because it will be a concern, and I'm not sure it's one that we can
because worst case, they can find out, like if you want to say that you have a corrupt official, they could just say, okay, well, during the sorting process, we'll just sort all the ones, because they know who they are and what their party is. They could.
It's a capacity. I mean, you don't even have to accuse officials of being corrupt. You just say this has a capacity to identify by party, and in a vitriolic party.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that it should not probably have an indication of party on the outside
or voter, but I don't think. I'm thinking ahead of what demands people are going to make, and then what arguments people are going to make against making such a demand, I really believe we need no excuse mail voting for this upcoming.
Yeah, well, this is another thing that we want to try to get to would be, well, let me go for that in a second.
Yeah.
I see, is it
Okay,
Steven Spitz? You have your hand up. Why don't you, you go ahead. Let me unmute you. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, hi. So I'm in Virginia, and I wanted to raise with the folks on the phone, and hi, Mimi, several problems that we're facing in Virginia given the current state of the law. One is currently you have to have a witness signature when you file an absentee ballot. Obviously, that doesn't make too much sense in the middle of a pandemic for somebody who, for example, lives alone and is a senior, to try to find somebody with a stay-at-home order. This is being challenged in federal court right now.
Well,
another thing in Virginia is there is no provision of prepaid postage. Unlike California, the envelope requires you to have a stamp. That has been characterized by the ACLU in a lawsuit in Georgia as a poll tax. That lawsuit is pending, but that's still a requirement that those same seniors should line up in the post offices around the state and buy stamps in the middle of the pandemic. Thirdly, the state is saying, oh, well, gee, even though they still have no excuse, absentee until July 1st, when it'll go to no excuse. But in the June 23rd primary, there is no real excuse, except the state party is saying, oh, just say 2A, which is disability or illness. Now, you know, I know that they're encouraging that, and you could just say that, but, you know, you're in a nursing home, and how's the word going to get that you could actually do an absentee ballot? And, well, they would have it. You're not in a nursing home. You're healthy, except you're afraid of voting because of the catching the virus. How is that going to be communicated without a change? And then there is the final issue that I wanted to throw out there is Virginia requires that the absentee ballot be postmarked, not postmarked by election day, but received by the registrar's office by election day, leaving the voter at the mercy of delays in the postal service. And all of those are changes that, you know, really need to happen, but we're in this environment here, and I'm sure in a lot of other states, where I think if among this group you could permitted my use of a technical term, this is a clusterfuck.
Yeah, technical term. Yeah.
And then also, can I just add to Stephen, this is Kristen, his colleague in Virginia, on his third point about where there's a need or requirement to give an excuse to do absentee voting, like currently in Virginia through June 30th. And then it also happens in Texas. There's a Texas state lawsuit brought by Republicans saying that you can't use the illness and disability excuse unless you're really disabled or ill, and not just because you could become ill or disabled from the coronavirus and that you're operating in a pandemic. So there's another lawsuit out there. It's in Texas state court on the whole thing of using illness, disability, because we're in a pandemic, whether or not you have COVID or not.
Yeah, well, that's pretty absurd, of course, isn't it? But you know, we have to expect this. And let me just say one thing. I see we're approaching the top of the hour. I want to try to get in as much as possible. There are, as Stephen just mentioned, and Kristen, I'm sorry, was mentioning, this does vary quite a bit across the country, and especially on the East Coast. Even though they have maybe absentee voting, it's configured such that the ballot has to, as we were hearing, has to arrive by election day. And a lot of times the reason for that is because they want to try to merge them together with that same package of ballots from the precinct and keep them all together. I've seen this, you know, watched how they do this. And so their mindset is in that versus the sort of over, you know, really delayed approach, which is nice for the voter in California, where you have postmarked by election day. Well, something happened in this last one was that the USPS no longer actually postmarks mail a lot of times anymore. So there is no postmark on it. And so then there was a debate about whether it arrived on time because there was no mark. And I think what they do here is that it has to arrive by 3 days after the election. Okay. And, you know, even if the mark wasn't on it, maybe they would still accept it. I'm not sure. But the point, though, is that there's this wide variety in it. And as that bill that went through the House to try to get in its last funding bill had a lot of nice things in it to try to base it around what was required to really do a good job in like what we see in California. But that also meant that it was going to take a very long time to process those ballots in those states where they're not used to doing it. Especially they're not, and they also have time scales that are sometimes written in their constitution to say that the processing has to occur within 14 days or something after the election. A really tight schedule that would take a constitutional and a state constitution change to be able to make that change. And so in my thinking, the only way to get something through for the near term, which we want to be able to, I believe, even with these downsides of, yeah, we're going to have some horseplay around the date or whether you can become, of course, we want it to be no excuse absentee voting. You don't have to have an excuse to ask for an absentee vote. So that would be the first criteria. And for those states that have these other limits, such as it has to arrive by election day, I think we're going to have to live with that and live with their other constraints in this first round. And then allow those things to be progressed later. So there would be kind of a menu concept of states that already have vote by mail and are very practiced at it, like the Western states. We don't have to worry about them too much, all the way down to these states that don't really have very much vote by mail right now. And we would have to accept a limited, a limited set of services to the voter in terms of accepting. Yeah, I don't think that we're going to be able to, because in looking at it, even though I would like to say, yeah, you have to do it the way California does it, where it's accepted by and postmarked by election day, and you have 3 more days, and a cure is 5 days. And as we saw, the letters that go out that say your signatures were not right, please come in and cure them. This is going it the right way, where everybody is given the opportunity to actually vote and get it in. These other states want to try to block and suppress voting as much as possible, and they're going to try to restrict it. So the first thing that we can get through, the most important one in my view, is this no excuse absentee voting. And I think that would be the sort of the guidepost for the minimum. And then maybe have a menu of these are the other items that if you can put these in. Okay, Mimi, I know you wanted to say something. Go ahead, because on that point.
I just put it in the chat as well.
Okay. All right.
But I think people are familiar if I say surrender rule with what happened when we mix vote by mail with vote centers and or polling places. If I think people, well, some people aren't generally aware, and LA voters and Californians weren't, but if you are sent a mail ballot, but you come to a polling place or vote center and try to vote in person previously, and still if the internet connection of the electronic sign-in at a vote center in order to get your proper ballot is down, you have to vote provisional. because the premise is we sent you your ballot. You don't have it to surrender to me to prove you didn't use it. Therefore, by law, I, the poll worker, must assume you voted in this election, and you can only cast a provisional vote now. I have long argued that the signature of the voter on that provisional envelope should be taken as legal affidavit that they have not voted previously in the election, and those provisionals should be counted before the absentee ballots are counted, but they're not. They wait till the end. Therefore, if other states said, yes, sure, we'll send everybody a mail ballot, or we'll even move to no excuse mail balloting, but they preserve this surrender rule and hide it the way California did for years. It's a handy voter trap, and I would hate to see this. If we or I or all these organizations really press for no excuse mail voting as a national mandate, which I absolutely believe we must do, I think, absolutely also have to include something to address what happens to the voter who then takes the in-person option for whatever reason and forgets, doesn't know, never received the ballot, shows up without the mail ballot in hand. In places where you have same-day registration, or you can cancel your mail ballot, which are two of the nice things that happened with an otherwise widely derided ballot marking device system in LA at vote centers. If that exists, then you don't need the surrender rule because you can cancel your mail ballot right there. But if that doesn't exist, and I imagine it will not exist in most places by the November election, then some version of what happens when you show up to vote in person, but you don't have the mail ballot they sent you. How do we have election law?
Okay, so Mimi,
Address it.
here's the way I understand it. Let me just make sure I'm clear about what you're saying. If the person comes in with their vote by mail ballot, they can surrender it then. And then you're saying, yes, because they're surrendering it, they can say, I haven't voted anywhere else. It should be merged in with the rest. No provisional ballot. I think that's the way it's done now.
Yes.
If they come in and
they
don't have their mail ballot, they don't know if they can surrender, if they voted by mail yet. Like if it's in the mail.
They must vote provisional.
But you're linking that with the ballot marking device, but I think it has really nothing to do with the ballot marking device.
No, right. No,
e-poll book.
I threw that in so everybody listening knows that this system has been derided, and it was partly because of ballot marking devices, but it was also partly because it depended on electronic sign-in, which was a virtual private network that dialogued with the county registrar. And it was able to say, this person doesn't have a vote by mail ballot, although I see that they were sent one. However, this person is canceling it and saying, cancel anything that comes in by mail to the registrar.
That's a function of the e-poll book, which by the way, was a disastrous failure. But if it was working right, then it would be.
I'm saying we're not going to have this nationwide for sure.
No, forget it. You know, this is the thing, is that these little niceties that we're talking about, how, you know, we're complaining about little things that we're already pretty spoiled here in California compared to the rest of this country.
But I am saying, right, I am saying we must tell the legislators what even our legislators here were not aware of. They're going to have to vote provisional. If we do no excuse mail balloting and everybody or a lot of more people get a mail ballot, there's gonna be a trap, and it probably has to exist by law to prove you didn't vote twice in an election.
Okay,
you're gonna have to pay attention to that mail ballot because it's your ticket to vote.
You're saying that the provisional, the issue with provisional voting is whether or not it's provisional is what we're talking about now. That is,
no, the issue is that in making a demand for no excuse mail balloting nationwide as the enfranchising choice that should be mandated for states who don't like it, or if we as election integrity people support this demand, it will be incumbent on us to either accompany that demand with some mitigation of the trouble that happens when people don't get their mail ballot or don't know the rules. In other words, the states can go, okay, we're sending everybody a mail ballot, and then they can conveniently disenfranchise or shunt 50% of the voters to provisional because those voters won't know the rules and they won't come in if they want to vote in person and they don't have their mail ballot. There may be a legal nicety, a necessity that is going to shunt them to provisional. I've seen it in California for decades,
right,
and they don't want it.
Let's assume that's going to be one of the scams that's played. However, in this election, maybe that's not going to be so important because most people will not want to come in at all. And so they will want to only vote by mail. Okay, so let's let Daniel have the floor.
I'd like to say something too, Ray.
Okay, well, he had his hand up first, so let's let Daniel Wolf say first. Okay, let me try to unmute you. I can't seem to. There you go. Go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks. I was actually just as you were saying that, I was trying to take my hand down, but I'll go ahead and throw it out and make it short. I just, with reference to things like delays in elections, permission to, all the things we've been talking about as being potentially not permitted by law. Speaking as a lawyer, there are all kinds of things that are not permitted by law or are mandated, which are not observed in fact. And if you think about, as an example, prosecutorial discretion, or even police discretion, at a traffic stop. Discretion is assumed in the law, and and discretion in ideal circumstances is a matter of, let's say, humane application of the law, and everybody understands it, even though it's not written anywhere in the Constitution or in the law. That it's just assumed that people of goodwill will apply the law with discretion. And so when just before Wisconsin went, before the governor with his newly restricted powers tried to declare a state of emergency and delay the election, I don't remember which state had done exactly the same thing, and I don't know if the governor there had greater power, but it is possible for even without powers, it is possible for a governor or some official like that to make a big decision. Hopefully, such decisions are made openly and transparently, in full public view, with other officials signing on to it and saying, under the circumstances, we will simply not contest this. So that, if that's a prior state before Wisconsin, if all of the people with power in the state had said, well, we're not going to go to court. We know the governor doesn't have legal authority to do this, but the rule of law has to yield at some point to considerations of safety and humanity. So we're just not going to make it an official issue. And if it's not an official issue, if the courts don't get a case, they can't decide a case. And that could have been done in Wisconsin. So I guess the lesson of this is simply that in those states where there is an obvious, and widely believed rationale for exercising humane discretion with respect to these particularistic rules of law, and there are parties that are insistent on obsessively obeying the rule of law, even though, of course, we know that they may be ignoring it in other respects, but they become purists in this case. The recourse is to simply raise this particular issue,
Does that mean keep it out of the courts?
Keep it out of the courts. If it doesn't go to court.
The trouble with that theory, though, Daniel, is that we have a political environment right now where if these two opposing parties see any kind of a glimmer of hope by taking it to court, they will.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally understand that. In Wisconsin, you would never have gotten a sign-on like that. I'm just saying that as a matter of the electoral...
I wish it was like that, but it's just not like that. Okay, I'll tell you what, go ahead, Dale, you got the floor.
Yeah, I just want to say I put in the chat that, let me see if I can scroll to it now. Sorry, hang on. I think what we're doing is we're one of the things we should be cognizant of is that we're always, everything we've discussed right now is centered around vote by mail, which is a little bit different than vote at home or vote from home, where you get a mail ballot and you have options to drop them off at the vote center and so on in person. And one of the things that initially attracted me to vote by mail and vote at home is that it would reduce some of the voter suppression that some of the southern states, people of color in southern states experience, that they would be intimidated at the polls, but that vote by mail would obviate, would mitigate some of that voter suppression. However, Barbara Arnwine makes a good presentation and contention that actually that's worse than the voter suppression at the polling, because those people voting by mail, those signatures can be the demographic that's mailing in these ballots can be identified, and they can be just tossed aside as not having a correct signature, or they haven't filled out all the boxes and so on. So that it's like a double-edged sword there. One way there's a positive and there's a definite negative aspect to it. But the thing that I put in the chat that I think is something that we should explore is that voters should be able to, if they've received a mailed ballot, they should be able to go in person and actually obviate the need for signature verification. Why would you, taking in your mailed ballot and having it all filled out, why wouldn't you be able to show the person at the vote center or at the polling place on election day that this is your mailed ballot, and that why should you have to fill out a different ballot now? Why wouldn't you be able to turn that ballot in on election day or at the vote center and not even have them process it to verify your signature, since you obviously have the mailed ballot?
So yeah, that's a good point, because what they do a lot of times now, if it's not one of these voting centers that has marking devices, they require that you spoil your ballot and re-vote on a different ballot instead of just turning it in. And then you could, if you did spoil it and turned it in, then you would get it right into the mix of ballots that were processed. But I think it's probably fair if we put that, let's try to address, since the time is already past the hour, how we can progress this in an effective way if possible. Would be the question, and I suggest this, and I suggested this before, is that we have kind of a starting point in this Google Doc, and I'm going to continue to work on trying to provide, maybe this is a good way, think about this, a sort of a menu of saying, okay, this is if you're first starting and all you have is very restrictive absentee voting. This is the first level, no excuse. And then next step is you accept it on postmarked on election day. Next step, you allow signatures cured and so forth. So you have a bunch of things in there that they can slowly progress down, hopefully a slippery slope. And I agree with you, Dale, that there are many scams, suppression scams that are voter suppression scams that are thwarted by vote at home and vote by mail, because there's no lines, there's no voting machines to try to make scarce and the like. But there's still another whole set of different things that can come into play. But I think those are things that we can kind of you know, they're going to kind of offset in the other direction. I have two hands up. Garland, you haven't said anything yet, so why don't we let you go ahead and you're unmuted.
Thanks, Ray. I just have one point and one question. In Georgia, they have implemented a rejection notification now on absentee ballots, which I think is a good thing. They're required to notify you if they reject your ballot, assuming that there's time. And then the question that I had is, in California, does California allow harvesting, which would be, in other words, different individual can turn in a ballot for somebody else?
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the weaknesses here. And if I share my screen again, we can see that on the envelope there is a box here where a person is authorized to return it, and you put in here the name of the person returning and a relationship and the signature of the person authorized to return. So, and this is arguably a weakness in this vote by mail and vote at home system, the way it's configured, especially in California, because there is an opportunity, and I think this opportunity is you know, taken advantage of, that the essentially these parties are going in and harvesting from retirement homes and the like, and giving maybe and you know, I don't know if it's a bad thing. I know that it could be bad, but if you come in and say, okay, we're all going to get out our ballots and vote. You can vote any way you want, but I'm going to help you, you know, make sure it gets processed right. And then they put it in and they carry it. Now, if they faithfully carry them in, then there's no harm done. But if you allow another party to get between the voter and the voting, you know, the collection point, then there's opportunity for a problem there.
Yeah, in Georgia, you're required to pre-register as disabled in order for somebody else to sign and turn your ballot in.
Okay, so in order to have someone else bring it in, you have to be disabled. Is that what you're saying?
Right, you have to have been pre-registered on your application for being disabled.
But you can you become a vote by mail voter and mail it in yourself, even if you're not disabled?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Or you can deliver it to the county.
Oh, okay, you can deliver it yourself. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, those are pretty good. I mean, I think that if we can get, here's the other good thing I like about, and it wasn't mentioned yet, vote by mail or hand-marked paper ballots. Okay, that's a really good thing. Vote by mail or hand-marked paper ballots, and so we don't have voting machines. We don't have a lot of things that come into play with not having those. Okay, so let's see here.
Hey, Ray, at some point I'd like to say something about this.
Let me let Mimi, since she's got her hand up, I'm trying to unmute you,
okay,
but it's not working.
Oh,
okay, there you
go. I don't have my hand up, Ray.
Oh, you don't? Okay, so go ahead. Go ahead, Cindy.
I just wanted to say that I've talked to several poll workers in California for this last election, and I know this was something that was seen in 2016 also, but they were reporting that a lot of people that came in person on the same day voting, they had to come in because they had received the wrong ballot. And so, for example, if they're MPP and requested a crossover ballot, they didn't get one, or they got a different party or whatever, they had the wrong ballot, and so they had to come in, and therefore they were given the provisional ballot. And I just think we need to address that somehow. In that, I know it's not going to be as important in the general, but it could be. I mean, even like on a local election, if you're voting for a supervisor or something, you know, you could be sent the wrong ballot, and then would that ballot then be tossed out, or is there any way to correct that? Because a lot of the people that were evidently coming in with the wrong ballot had tried to resolve it by calling their elections office, and they just never were able to resolve it that way. And it seemed intentional because there were so many people that happened to.
Oh yeah. Okay. So it isn't. This is what we were talking about before in terms of the going to provisional or not. This is one of the issues that comes into play. And Mimi was talking about the trap and so forth. When you don't have your, you know, people that are not used to vote by mail situation, they won't bring in their ballot. They'll go provisional, and Sometimes they'll misuse, I think very much so, they've misused this provisional side trap. Okay, I see Madge has her hand up. Go ahead, Madge.
Yes. One concern that a friend of mine has is that with the vote by mail, people that register vote by mail but generally don't vote, that information is not to registrar voters and other people, and they could theoretically just grab those people's ballots, you know, just turn in ballots on behalf of those people, and if they were to go on election day and vote in person, or even voted, you know, well, let's say they were to vote in person, then that vote is thrown out because they've already voted by mail, even though it wasn't really them voting by mail. I don't know how likely that is, but there is, in my opinion, election fraud, and that's one way vote by mail could be used to give a candidate that wants a lot, that needs a lot of votes. For example, Debbie Wasserman Schultz got a lot more votes than she probably really got in real life, and maybe that was what happened. People just turned in a bunch of absentee ballots for people that don't generally vote, and so their votes were thrown out when they didn't, in fact, try to vote.
Okay, so that's a good point. And that let me rephrase this: that you want ideally it to be possible for you to go to the polling place and vote and override a early arriving vote by mail ballot. And I believe that was what they were trying to put in place here in California, that it would do that. But this isn't, again, something that is not going to be possible for us to expect. These new states that are not used to doing a lot of vote by mail to have these, you know, really good features that are, you know, that come into play as you start to get more and more vote by mail voting going on. But yeah, that's another sort of a scam. Let's let Tim White have the floor. You haven't said anything yet. Go ahead.
Yes, Ray. I'd like to put forth the Washington model, which addresses a lot of these things with a really different approach. In Washington, there's nothing sacred about the actual ballot which is sent out. You can photocopy it. Anyone can download a replacement ballot from the VoteWa, the central website of the Secretary of State. Basically, we flood Washington State with blank ballots for any precinct. All of the control is based on the signature match. If more than one ballot is returned, it's not really a problem. They always count the first ballot returned. If you return a second ballot, you get a replacement ballot and send it in, it's always the first ballot that is returned. Now in Michigan, I read that it is the last ballot returned, which they count, which is more the European model and to protect against voter coercion. If someone is coerced into voting a mail ballot, then they can send in another one in Michigan. In Washington, it's the first one that's counted. So I'm asking, in Colorado and in California, how difficult is it to get a replacement ballot?
You're saying, where do you want the question to go to?
I'm curious, in California and in Colorado or other states.
Go ahead. Mimi's got her hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mimi.
Yeah. Yes, in California, they always count the most recent mail ballot returned, precisely for the reason that if a voter says, I never got my ballot, and they send out another one, they're going to wait till that ballot comes back. I think it has to happen by election day. But this is where timing becomes part of any kind of election fraud scam. And, you know, timing is always what was used by the Republicans in Florida in 2000. Timing is always an important hole to look at in elections. But generally, if I call up, and this did happen to me, I had to get 3 absentee ballots before one actually arrived to me, and it had to be delivered by hand. I don't know where the other ones went, but they're tracked by numbers, the ones they send out to us. So when I asked for the second and the third, they automatically, in issuing another one, they nullified the numbers on the first 2. So if those had been stolen and forged and they came in, they would not be counting that. They would be waiting for my third one to come in. They will have nullified. If they issued a third, they've nullified the first 2.
As soon as you request it, they nullify it?
As soon as they issue it, yeah, they nullify the first 2. So that's a good protection. But I want to address what happens. The only way you can nullify a mail ballot that was issued to you, or even one that the registrar received, voted, and you show up to vote in person and go, I never got my mail ballot, that's why I'm here in person, or the one I got was that in the primary, the wrong one, or in the general, it didn't have my candidate for Congress on it, whatever. You can only do that, as of now, with electronic poll books. A, jurisdictions won't have them, and B, they don't work real perfectly, and they were responsible for long lines. But while saying that, I want to add this. When we talk about the election in the fall, we should say the 2020 presidential, a lot of problems happened in LA because we kept saying Super Tuesday, November 3rd, and everybody, most voters just went, I'm going on Super Tuesday to vote. And those vote centers were absolutely empty for 2 weeks. I would go in them and it was nothing. It was just a big empty gymnasium or wherever they were.
Right.
And then there were 2-hour, 3-hour lines because everybody said Super Tuesday. We have to find a way to talk about the election that reflects a different span of voting if there's going to be all this stuff. That's more for media, but I wanted to.
Yeah, that cancels out early voting. If you say Super Tuesday, then you don't think about early voting.
And then everybody blames the fact that we had electronic poll books, which were allowing this nullify your mail ballot. We had a plus, but it was absolutely erased because I don't think we got a fair shake on knowing about e-poll books. I'm not advocating for them. I'm just saying that it gave us something great and nobody ever noticed it because they didn't work because of the crush.
Well, I think that my feeling is, though, that Mimi, is that in other parts of the country, these e-poll books are not, they are not unusual. They're used a lot more and more effectively than what we had here in California.
Oh, interesting. Wow. Okay.
So when I go to other places, I see the e-poll books are like, are you kidding me? Of course we use those. And
so they could nullify a mail ballot that was not being used, even if it was
not even doing mail ballots very much, but they're doing a lot of the e-poll books in terms of at the voting center. Okay, so Harvey's got his hand up next.
Yeah, that's a really couple of very complicated topics there. Colorado counts the first ballot back. Ballots are actually 2 different items, an envelope and the content ballot. And either one of them could be serial numbered, but very dangerous to do so. I believe California does not allow the interior ballot page to be serial numbered or identified to the voter. The Colorado law actually did allow that, and it was changed after an attempt to sue the Secretary of State. In fact, in Colorado, it's very easy to get the contents pages, that is the sheets that go inside, and you can certainly get them out of somebody else's mail ballot that arrived nearby, gets thrown out in trash in post offices, etc. And you can even get a hold of the envelope, but the issue of the access to the envelope and the access to the content ballot's very different. And one of the risks is that if you do have a lot of paper ballots floating around, voters can actually vote in a district that's not the one they are eligible for, and that can lead to lawsuits later. And it questions whether or not the system is actually checking whether the ballot that actually returns is the one that was sent to the voter. Mimi is suggesting that that's absolutely the case. I doubt it because I didn't see that kind of coding on the ballots. I don't think they're making that check with when they're doing the opening. In fact, I guess I'm sure they aren't because I watched the opening. So whatever ballot page happens to be inside is going to be deemed to be valid. There's 1 or 2 counties in Colorado that actually do, I think, still check the style of the ballot coming back to see whether it matches the one that was supposed to be coming from that voter. But of course, that can change in a vote by mail election because the voter can move during the time of the election. That is between the time the ballot's sent out and the time it comes back. So it's really important to drill down to the details on this stuff. And unfortunately, the national conversation isn't capable of doing that. And the election officials who are considering massively increasing vote by mail aren't going to be doing it because even the best advisors from different states are probably not going to spend a lot of time on this topic. But it's crucial if you get a narrow margin election. I also mentioned in the chat that the workers who are actually opening deciding whether the envelope packets that are coming back are eligible are looking at demographic information they probably shouldn't be looking at, including sex, party, age, address, etc. All that stuff actually gives them demographic data about the voter, which could be used for biasing their crucial decision about whether that voter is going to end up in a cure program or are they going to get to vote right away. So that's another area that needs to be looked at very carefully. And it's not just the data on the outside of the envelope. California provisionals, there are tens of thousands of them in the counties I looked at, and they do have all that demographic data on them. And there's even more irony there, but I won't stop at this point.
Okay, Garland.
I just had a quick question. I kind of goes along with what Harvey's comments are about. I didn't see how you could make the last vote count or the last ballot count because you had to tie the previous vote to the voter. And I was wondering if somebody could explain that, how that would work.
Well, I think that, yeah, go ahead, Mimi.
It works in that as the mail ballots come back, they're arranged and will ultimately be processed starting, I think, 3 days before Election Day. So if I call and I say a week before the election, where's my mail ballot? You haven't sent one to me. They see in my computer file that they sent me a mail ballot. And they go, I'll send you a new one. I'm going to nullify the one we have sent you. Somehow they are able to do that. And frankly, I haven't looked into why, but I think it's because they track every ballot they send and they know its number. So during the processing, they would know what it was.
Okay.
And
that would be the number on the envelope.
Yeah.
Right. The number on the envelope. So they nullify it. And when that comes in, if it gets scanned during processing, it will say, don't count that. It'll have some message about the voter has nullified this.
Okay, and key to this whole thing is this can't happen unless you are still prior to the election and you have not already taken the ballot out of the envelope and put it into processing.
That is a big problem. Processing mail ballots does a lot of damage because it becomes anonymous, and any problem the voter logs in after that, it becomes moot. That vote is counted.
If this happens before they process the envelope and take the ballot out, then it's conceivable that they could stop it in process and not have that ballot taken out and basically off stack it and wait for the other envelope to come in. That's how it works. See what I'm saying? Okay, now Tim, go ahead.
That's what I was getting at. That it was prior to casting, I think is what you're talking about, right?
I'm not hearing you, Tim.
Okay, Mimi, this is really important because the reason I brought up my question is how do they authenticate that it is Mimi Kennedy when you call up and ask for a replacement ballot and they cancel all the previous ones? Here in Washington, anyone can do that online for anyone, request a replacement ballot and automatically cancel any previous ballots that voter has put in.
Yeah.
So what stops me from calling up and say, I'm Mimi Kennedy, you didn't send me a ballot? Oh yeah, we said we did. Oh, well, we'll send you a new one. Okay, thanks, bye. And cancels a ballot you sent in.
Yeah.
That's really
I
good.
haven't asked that question, but that could clearly be done given the process that I followed.
Ouch.
Oh, yeah.
In Washington, we can do that with a single click online. We can click, send me a replacement ballot in the mail. If you click this box, any previous ballot will be suspended.
Wow.
I can disenfranchise anyone else simply with their name and their birth date, which is from here, freely available voter registration database. It's a major problem with the Washington system and the counting of the first ballot that comes in.
Wait, but they do count the first ballot that comes in. So then they would be counting the voter's real ballot, and the disenfranchiser wouldn't be getting it.
The disenfranchiser clicks that button on the ballots arrive 3 weeks before the election, before anyone has a chance to actually return their vote by mail ballot by mail.
Oh, so gets a new one, steals it from the address, and
Well, no, you don't steal it. You can you just request a new one, or you can also
it goes
click
to that address of the voter.
download and print at home a ballot for anyone, including the envelope, send it in without a signature, vote it, but send it in without a signature. And if it gets in there before the person, the actual voter, they will think, well, this is the right ballot, and they will wait and they will contact that person and say, you forgot to sign your ballot. Oh, no, I think I did. I think I sent it. No, we have it right here. You didn't sign it. So you send in your signature and cure it, but you cure the ballot that I voted, not the second ballot that you sent in, which is not going to be counted.
So that's another timing, a time-based trick. That sucks, but it's timing-based, yeah.
That's a horrible loophole in this whole system. Did you have your hand up, Garland?
I'm sorry, no, no, go ahead, I might bring back.
Okay, so basically, I see that we've gone 90 minutes. This has been a lot of fun. It's nice to see people's faces and that we're all still not in the hospital on ventilators. But I'll tell you what, I think that what we can do is continue on the list. I want to try to move our email list toward more productive interaction. I've been trying to clamp down on both Tim and Brad and Ralph, and they're going off on side trips about too many inconsequential arguments. And so, and then also work on this document. I know it's just some ideas, but if we can bring in some of these facts that we just brought up, I think were quite revealing, especially these things from Washington and the timing about how you know, these are things that people don't think about because it is pretty complex. How do you deal with the cancellation, whether you received it or not, how it gets cured? Those are all things that do make it more complex. Garland, you want to say something?
Oh, I did have one more question. I'm sorry. I just wanted to know what time do they start processing the ballots for counting? Do they do that like in Georgia, it's election day at 4 p.m.
When do they start counting the ballots?
Yeah, the mail-in ballots.
In California, they can start, I think, 10 or 11 days before election day. They can start processing them. And I don't think they can necessarily tabulate them, but they can start doing the signature checking and validation and getting them all set up for tabulation. They've said to me in some places like LA, no, we're not tabulating yet. And I go up there and yes, indeed, they were tabulating. But they were—
Ray, that's been seen in lots of places. That's why I muted it. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, and so, but they are supposed to not know what the tabulation totals are. And so, you know, of course, you have a computer that's tabulating things, then you can probably, you know, if you have enough authority, you can find out what the numbers are. So it would be better if you said, okay, you can start to process these, but don't take them out of the envelope until the very last minute, because that way you can, you know, you can side stack out the ones that the person wants to not use. If another one comes in, this sort of thing, and then very last minute, then start taking them out of the envelope. But it takes time. And so here in San Diego, they had this huge room of people with them, you know, we're watching them where they're stacking them up so that they can't see the person's name, taking them out, spreading them out so that they're flat, and setting them down. I'll post a video of them doing that because I took some video of this whole room of them taking it out so you can see what it's like. And it is a long process. I mean, and so they have probably, I don't know, 100 people there on tables taking them out. And then they run them through the scanners, and all this takes time. So that this is why we have, when you start talking about vote by mail, it adds this other dimension that most people are not used to. The same as what you're saying, Mimi Kenny. Everybody says Super Tuesday. The media wants to do a horse race during the night and have it all done by 10 p.m. And then they start saying, you know, who won right away, you know, and basically I'm still over there at the Registrar of Voters watching them barely scan the ballots in. And they haven't counted anything, and yet the media is saying who won. That's not fair to those voters. So there's a lot of things that come with this, even though we do see, I think we have to acknowledge that in this day of COVID-19, people are not going to want to go to the polls, and this is a way to do it. It's a good way to do it, but it has all these issues. Okay, very good. Thanks, everybody, and stay well, and we'll see you on the list and next time. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for doing it, Ray.
Thank you.